All right. Um, I'm Kim Kushner, and I serve as the Assistant Director of New Student and Family Programs. And for folks who are joining us, I see a few familiar faces and names via the Zoom conversation. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to our fantastic faculty, staff, advisors just momentarily, but just wanted to let you know that our UMKC Family Week is happening all week. And we're just so thankful for our parents, families, and supporters. And we see you all is so crucial in helping your students stay well and do well. It's kind of been my philosophy and the way I've been saying it all week. So join us, go.umkc.edu/family week. There's lots of cool stuff happening all week. So from now, I'm just going to turn into moderator here and help get Tammy all set. Go for it.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Kim. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Tammy Welchert, and I serve as UMKC's Director for Academic Advising. And today we're here to talk with you about how to help your students when things get tough. So we know that your students are undergoing a lot of transitions right now, particularly if they're new freshmen. And of course, COVID is just continuing to present challenges for us. So we are all working together to address your concerns. But today we're going to focus on kind of what we see as the top 5 issues that we experience historically with new students at UMKC as they make that transition. So we're going to be talking about time management. We're going to talk about students being unsure of their major, interpersonal conflicts, having difficulty with course material, and then last but not least, especially if your student is not from the Kansas City area, talking a little bit about homesickness. So we're all here. We'll be providing our contact information as we go. I am going to enter into the chat here. I just put a handout for you based on our presentation, so you'll have that if you want to print it or save it. But I'm going to get us started with our first speaker, who is Matt Seidner. So let me get that screen flipped. There you go. So Matt, can you introduce yourself and get us started off talking with time management?
Yeah, thank you, Tammy. So my name is Matt. I'm an academic advisor in University College, and that is our academic unit here at UMKC for exploratory students. So I get a chance to work with a lot of freshman students, and as a first-time college student, for those of us who went to college, we can probably relate, but as I'm working with students, I know a lot of them feel overwhelmed when they first come to school in their first semester. And there's a lot of things going on. It can be a kind of a first point in your life when you're getting some independence and you're making your own decisions and you're responsible for going to class, doing your own assignments, those kind of things. So time management is really, really important. It's something that we try and help develop and teach to our students. So one of the key things about having good time management that we really stress is to, one, get organized. So it's going to look a little different for each student, but helping them figure out a way to develop a kind of organization system. So one of the common ones that students like to use is using some kind of planner or a calendar. So this could be a hard copy planner that you buy at the store. I know some students use a Google Calendar or use their phone. So just some place and some way to keep track of weekly schedule, assignments, when exams are coming up, everything that's going on with all the classes. So another tool that's helpful with kind of tracking and making sure everything is organized in one place is our Canvas system, which with most of our classes being in some sort of an online format this semester is especially helpful. So Canvas is the system where students can access their courses online. They can find the syllabus, course information, coursework assignments, those kind of things. So a couple of kind of key points that I think is helpful with time management is, one, making sure students are prioritizing their coursework. So this kind of plays into planning out your schedule when you're going to do things. So if a student is able to look ahead and see when an exam is due or when an assignment is due, whether that's later in the week or the very next day coming up, or if it's a couple weeks away, then it's a little easier to prioritize, the work in the order that you complete it. For example, if you got a quick discussion board post that's due tomorrow and you got a big exam coming up next week, you want to make sure and get that discussion board post or that assignment that won't take as much time, and then you can focus on studying for that exam. Another thing I think is really helpful with students is actually scheduling out time in your week or in your day to set aside time to actually study. So this kind of gets into, I know it's a little small, but there's a picture of basically kind of like a weekly time calendar thing on the page here. Something that I like to do with some of my students is to have them first track for a week how they use their time. So literally every hour of the day that they're awake, tracking what they're doing. So whether that's going to class, how much they spend time studying, how much they're working on homework, if they have a job, how much time they spend at a job, how much they sleep, if they take naps, if they're hanging out with friends. So anything that they do during the day, they're tracking that. So once they track that for a full week, then it kind of gives you an inventory of how you're actually using your time. And it helps you look at maybe different ways that you can utilize your time, things you can adjust. And then that kind of gives you a good starting point to look forward and kind of plan out optimally what you would like your schedule to look like and to better manage your time. So it's something that we have started doing and that I've started doing with some of my students. It's been very helpful. And I know that Tammy just popped into the chat is so kind of like a good rule of thumb is for every hour that a student spends in class, you'll want to devote about 3 to 4 hours of time outside of class to studying and doing coursework for that course. And then some resources for students to go to if they just need help developing time management and don't know exactly where to start. One is their academic advisor. So the advisor is a great person to go to kind of get some ideas and even point you in the right direction to other resources. So another resource that's great is the Academic Support and Mentoring Program. So through this service, students can have access to supplemental instruction and tutoring services. So even meeting with a tutor here at UMKC, they can help a student figure out better studying habits, better study strategies, and even how to manage their time as they're studying. And then the third one I listed here as another resource is our peer academic leaders. So we have a PAL program. So these are students who are peer mentors who are current UMKC students. So I know sometimes it's helpful for a student or an incoming freshman or a new freshman to speak with someone who has recently been in their position. They're kind of in the same boat. So it's a little easier to relate sometimes when you're speaking with another student as a student yourself. So those are 3 kind of primary resources that I listed here that I think are great starting points as students are looking to develop time management and kind of build that skill set.
Tammy, I believe you are muted.
Thank you. Yes, technology. So what I was saying is thank you to Matt. And before we move to our next speaker, wanted to remind you that the chat is open. So as you think of questions while the speaker is happening, or as Jeff put in new topics that we might address at the end, please feel free to use that, and I'll continue to input comments as we go. But our next speaker is Karina Beck, and Karina is going to talk about homesickness.
Thanks, Tammy. And before I start, I just wanted to apologize. My brand new headset is not working. So I hope this is loud enough and you can all hear me. And I apologize if you hear dog noises in the background. I have 2 of them and they make a lot of noises. So sorry about that. We will start talking about just the fact that homesickness is really normal. Most, I would say probably all students experience it, even if they're not willing to talk about it. So some of the things that we talk about to help them with this is, well, to bring something from home, something that reminds them of how much their parents love them, how much they love their dog. That was me, if you were me. It's important for them not to get too caught up on home. So we talk a lot about balance. So bringing stuff from home, but also doing stuff that's new. So you can do some of the things that you did at home that made you happy. You know, for instance, running, if that was exercise or whatever it was that you did, listening to particular music, that kind of thing is wonderful. But college is a great time to explore new parts of your personality and even reinvent yourself a little bit. So we do talk about being able to explore and develop as an adult in this way. So you're starting to kind of make that mix of things that have always been part of you and creating new habits, new wonderful things to do with your time. As everybody's aware at this point, I think we all know how to use Zoom. Everybody who's on this certainly knows how to use Zoom. So I actually added it to this slide for this here. But in the past, we used Skype or FaceTime, whatever it is that you were doing to be able to electronically connect with your family members who aren't close to you. And not just your family members, but your old friends. So it's important for students to remember that they have opportunities for new friends, but they also want to keep those connections from old friends. It's important for students to remember to make time for exercise and sleep. And Matt talked about this with his scheduling. There's almost no other way to do it besides schedule yourself to do it. So in college, students tend to, it almost becomes a competition between some of them about how little sleep they got. It's, oh, I know I'm managing on 3 hours a night. That's not good for them. It's not helping their neurotransmitters be able to work on learning new information. It's not good for them physically. It's not good for them emotionally. So the more that you can help to encourage your student to exercise and sleep and take care of their bodies so they can be really good students, but also keep together with their new life, would be helpful. Sometimes students, especially during COVID, have been having a hard time connecting with new students, with the new facilities, new whatever, all the new stuff. RU Groups is UMKC's student organization group. And there's the website right there. And Tammy, I've already shared this slideshow with you, so you can go back in it and look at it more carefully. But this has all of our student groups. It's almost impossible for a student to look at the student groups and RU groups and not find something that they can respond to, that they can connect with. They have something for quite literally everybody. And if there happens to be, I don't know, they want to do potato races or something, and they need to make this in their own new group, they can also create their new group. They can create a new potato racing RU group, which would be fabulous. I'm sure they can find other potato racers to, connect with at some point, someplace across campus. Mind Body Connection is a fabulous organization on campus as well. They do, thanks, Colin. I would join that group too. Mind Body Connection is a fantastic place where students can go to relax. They have a relaxation chair. They have, it's a place where you can get connected with counseling. It's a place where you can get connected with all kinds of different resources to really help relax your mind and your body and reconnect the fact that those two things are all part of the same. You can't have a mind without a body. You can't have a body without a mind. So this is a place where you're trying to reconnect yourself with these. And I think Jeff mentioned earlier about counseling services and wondering how students get connected with that through academic advising. I bet as an advisor, at least during advising season, I bet I recommend at least one student a day to counseling services. If I'm talking to a student and they're talking to me about, being overly sad, that these are new feelings for them, being exceptionally anxious, we have a fantastic counseling service on campus that they can really connect with. There's a free intake, and then there are free 8 individual sessions for the year. And then after that, it's a nominal price. So it's a wonderful thing for students who are struggling to be able to take advantage of, and even students who aren't struggling, but who may want to just check in and have somebody be another extra connection for them. Counseling services is a great way to do that. So yeah, I would say probably all advisors do a lot of referrals to counseling. I have occasionally had students who wanted counseling and didn't feel like they were too introverted to make the connection themselves. And I will call in with their permission to counseling services to get them scheduled right then. I imagine other advisors have done that as well, but that way they don't have to make that extra step later. They're getting connected now and they're feeling that kind of non-interrupted service and connection with people who care about them and who want to make sure that they're doing well. I feel like I probably missed something in the chat here. Let me glance at it really quick. Oh, you've actually walked a few students. Yeah, I work on the other campus, so I'm about 4 miles away from counseling services. So I've never walked a student there, but I have I've contacted one of my, this is a story. It was a Friday night. I was at 5 o'clock on a Friday and I was walking through the hallways and saw one of my students who was really struggling. And I called the director of the counseling center, who told me that he was going to keep the counseling center open for her so that she and her child could come over and see him. And he called me as soon as they got there so that I would know that they got there safely. And he ended up talking to her. I don't even remember how late. It was after 7 that night. And that was on a Friday evening. So this is just, I can't say enough about how committed our counseling services are to our students and to the mental health and well-being of our entire campus.
Thanks, Karina. Appreciate that. So our next speaker, please continue to put information into the chat and we'll continue to share that way. Our next speaker is Cheney Folsom, and Cheney's going to share with us about students who may be unsure of their major.
Hi, I'm Cheney. I'm an academic advisor for the College of Arts and Sciences. I also meet specifically with history major undergraduate students, and this is something I deal with quite a bit. It's both students who are unsure of what their major, students who want to change majors, and I think my first advice is always kind of relax a bit. Majors are not destiny, but they are part of the fun of going to college. So I think the first thing is to try to figure out, where does college fit into the longer term life goals of a student? Where are they hoping to accomplish at college, and how does that lay a foundation for what they plan to do for a good chunk of their lives? And so they should start out by asking, what are my abilities? What am I good at? What do I like? What are, my interests, my passions? What do I plan to do? And how does this all fit into the longer term? And then we start looking at what programs are actually available that would accommodate these kind of goals. It's difficult to become an archaeologist if you don't have an archaeology program, but there are ways to build around what UMKC offers specifically and how to get you into a preparation for archaeology. And so that's what I work with these students. And we have a lot of different things that let them assess these programs. We have major maps that they can go through. I often joke with students that a lot of them decide to become dance majors when they have no idea what that means. And so these major maps allow students to actually kind of look ahead through 4 years of what that program expects the students to do semester by semester. And if you have no rhythm, you shouldn't be a dance major. If you have an antipathy towards mathematics, the sciences are something you need to look, like askance at to think. But all these kind of programs actually help the students to kind of map this out, to look at the pros and cons of, is it easier to get to law school with a history degree or a biology degree? And the answer is actually, it's probably easier to choose either one of these, right? But we start going through these and looking at them and seeing how these courses of studies actually open doors for them in a broad sense towards their particular goals too. And I also tell my students all the time that you got to be open to the possibilities. A lot of times while you're stumbling through or looking at something that looks like only a required class, you actually find out that you actually really do like mathematics. One of my favorite stories is one of my history majors became a biology minor, found herself in a summer field school in Ireland where her biology actually is what they came to prize, because she was sifting through, centuries old crud from an old stable. So her biology actually served her larger purpose there. And this is something that was just serendipitous, but she came back with renewed interest in both history and biology. And then to be thinking kind of ahead, your future goals and desires also could help prompt you towards what to pick. But we have lots and lots of resources at UMKC, you know, starting with your academic advisor, but the faculty mentors and faculty advisors. We have career services who have a battery of actually kind of fun tests that you can go through, and they kind of help you determine what your interests are, what you're good at, all these kind of things. And then you can bring those back to us. I often have students take these tests in my office because it's kind of fun to go through them. It's kind of a very enjoyable experience to find out, you know, things you didn't know about yourself but are highlighted by some of these things. And then we could also look at careers. You know, it's one of my favorite ex-students at UMKC actually was part of the Toyota Prius development team, and he had a psychology degree. And I've always, to this day, marveled that somebody with a psychology degree had a major job at Toyota. I think this is real fascinating, all these different things. So, like I said, my thing is mostly if people are unsure of major, just kind of sit back and relax. And then let's talk about it. Let's really look at it. Let's tap into the resources. Let me send students off, or my fellow advisors send students off to talk to the people that are working in these fields and see how we can craft this plan of study here at UMKC to suit their longer term, larger goals. Any questions for me or anything here? Okay, I think that's pretty much it.
Okay, great. Thanks, Cheney.
You're welcome.
If you have new freshmen that are at UMKC this fall who are enrolled in our first semester experience class, I put in the chat that they are all completing this week a belonging survey. So we're getting some information from the students about how they're doing with making friends, being, you know, feeling connected, feeling like they belong here at UMKC. And so we're going to be reaching out to them based on some of their responses. But also in that class, we just started this week a 3-week series that will help students to think about what their major options are. We did an assessment this week in class about how their interest and the things that they've done well in academically to date and the things that they're interested in might influence their decisions for careers. So we know that having a plan makes being motivated to do well and stay in college to complete their degree is significant. So we try and work with them right from their very first semester to help them make those plans so that they can continue.
Yeah, and Tammy, if I may, I actually had first semester experience in my notes, but kind of skipped over it. And I do think this is one of the things where incoming freshmen can actually have their eyes opened or have kind of stick their toe in a lot of things, because these are, you know, fairly good faculty members that are introducing them to, you know, the larger major, the larger fields, helping them narrow down and what's, you know, what they're interested in, you know. And I think this whole first semester experience is actually, if the students walk into it with kind of like with eyes open, this could be a major assistance in them fine-tuning their majors. You know, why a biology degree instead of a chemistry degree? You know, why a history instead of anthropology? I think this could really help them, especially if they walk into it looking forward to the experience of having, you know, kind of things slapped around, smashed around, the mismatch, you know, like I said, really be open to the possibilities they're about to hear about.
Yeah. Yeah, this is they get a lot of information, but the reality is that, you know, they have very little life experience at this point. So our job is to really make that exposure very wide this semester to make them more aware of options that are available to them. So thank you. Our next speaker is Rebecca Davis. So let me roll that slide forward here for you. And Rebecca, one of the things that you might address, if you weren't already planning to do so, is one of our parents have addressed what faculty do to reach out and encourage students to ask questions and be engaged in the classroom.
All right, thank you, Tammy. So I am Dr. Rebecca Davis. I'm both an advisor in the history department for history majors and minors, but I also teach in the history department. Perhaps some of the parents who are online have students that are in one of my classes. I teach the large surveys of American history, both first and second half, that are two of the classes that meet the constitutional requirement that all students have to do. So generally students either encounter one of my classes or they take Poli-Sci 210, which is the US government class. So in terms of, and I mean, my topic is what to do when kind of you have difficulty with course material. And I would say that every single faculty member, when we design our courses, our syllabus, what things are in Canvas, do things a little bit differently. And so I know that that can be very challenging to students in the fact that they have one professor that does it this way, one professor that does it this way, one professor that has everything due kind of at the end of the week. Other professors have things that are due kind of different days of the week. And I know that it's super difficult to keep it all straight. And that's one of the things that I have challenged myself to think about, and my graduate teaching assistants who deal with students on a day-to-day basis, is to think about the fact that, I mean, students are kind of having to be forced into lots of different systems for each of these different professors, and it's hard to keep them all straight. So I echo kind of our first presenter's comments about staying organized and having kind of a schedule where you kind of keep track of, like, what things do I have due for this class? Am I in face-to-face classes? Am I in a mixture of hybrid classes or online synchronous classes or online asynchronous classes? And that makes it very difficult during COVID, because we have some professors who typically would be teaching face-to-face that now have this challenge of their own to figure out kind of online in a way that they may not be completely comfortable with, who perhaps had to transition to online back in March and still haven't kind of wrapped their brain around how to do it. So just kind of figure out the system of each individual professor. And that, again, depending on how organized that professor is, how much that they kind of put out there is important. So I know, like, for my classes, I set it up in a way that I hope is kind of helpful and kind of doesn't take a lot of figuring out. I know every week I post not only an announcement, but a video going through, like, here's what we're doing this week. Please make sure you keep these due dates in mind, or please, like, think about the fact that even though we're focused on this week, a week from now or 2 weeks from now, we have an exam. But I can't say how many other professors do it in that way. I'm sure there are professors that have far better systems than what I have, but I try to have those reminders pretty frequently. So look at the syllabus for your class. Look on Canvas. I know that many professors, myself included, have syllabi that perhaps are kind of intimidating when you open them, because they're so long. And I struggle with, when I look at my syllabus, I'm like, man, this is a really long document. Do I really expect students to read it? But I also am trying to answer a lot of questions that I've had in the past. And so therefore I'm trying to kind of put that information in there. So as simple as it sounds, encourage your student, your child, to read the syllabus that their professor provided. Look at Canvas and see, is that question already answered? And then ask questions, even if you think that they are silly or stupid questions, because chances are somebody else in that class has those same questions. Reach out to your professor or your GTA. We want to help you. I know that sometimes students, especially kind of first generation students or freshmen, do not understand what the term office hours means. I was surprised by how many students, when I asked them a couple years ago, thought that office hours meant that that's the time when I'm in my office working and I do not want to be bothered, when in fact that's the opposite. Like, those are the times when I'm available to help students. And I know yesterday, for example, I had 2 hours of Zoom office hours that were completely uninterrupted by students, and I got to get a lot of work done, but I would have much rather have seen several students popping into my office. Now, I've seen in the chat some concerns about, well, some students are introverted, some students are just shy, some are kind of ashamed to ask for help. So how can, as kind of Tammy asked me to address, how can professors be proactive in reaching out to students? And I mean, it depends on the professor. I know that I set up kind of required meetings with me in small group sessions a couple times during the semester, where students sign on to Zoom and they have some kind of smaller group, rather than 120 students, maybe 5 students, and we can talk through kind of course material. And then I encourage them that if they need to talk to me about their individual situation, to let me know. If I see students in the gradebook who have fallen off or perhaps haven't done as well, I ask my GTAs, who are the ones who track that day-to-day progress, to reach out to those students. And we're kind of relying on students to respond to us. I can't tell you, like, it's difficult to reach out to a student like, hey, I see that you're having problems on these papers. What can I do to help? And if students don't respond, we can't force them to come into one of those sessions to get that help. But I know that I try very hard to reach out to students, or I put people, I put the GTAs kind of on that task for me. And I'm not asking for kind of sympathy on the part of students, but I also want them to recognize the fact that some of their professors have a tremendous amount of students. So I have 267 students this semester. It's really hard for me to go chase down those who missed some quizzes last week. That we want to help students, but sometimes we are relying on students to come to us if things aren't going the way that they planned on it. So again, I'm not trying to make excuses for not reaching out to students, but sometimes it's kind of a difficult proposition for each of us to do. And know that sometimes just because it's hard doesn't mean that it's bad. There are sometimes, like, I had an email from a student just today. They're like, oh, this is really difficult. Can I get a different assignment? And my response was like, no, I'm really sorry, but that's part of the point. Like, I know that this is difficult. I know that, like, we're trying to work through this process. Let me help you through the process, rather than just saying, I don't know how to do this and throwing up their hands.
Yeah.
College is the time for us to learn new things, new perspectives, sometimes perspectives that are completely foreign to what we had understood before. And so I would just encourage students that don't just get frustrated because it's new and difficult. If it's too difficult, then we want to help you, but kind of keep that in mind. Also, resources that UMKC has. So if you have a student who has a class that's supported by supplemental instruction or SI, like, reach out to that SI leader, go to those review sessions and study sessions, reach out to the professor, know that NetTutor is something that's available through Canvas, the Writing Center. So if they have a paper due and they have no idea how to do citations, go to the Writing Center. And don't wait until it's kind of too late to salvage a semester. So it's hard for professors to help a student who comes to us the last week of the semester, who's had 15 weeks of not doing all that well, and to help them in that week that's left.
Great, thanks, Becky.
Yeah.
So just like with faculty and advising, it's really a partnership between our students and our faculty and our students and our academic advisors. So I think we're all, we try and teach students the best things, sharing with them your experiences about when you've had difficulty in your life and how you went about handling that can help them to understand that not everything is easy and that we all need help. No one gets through their job or through college alone. So here at UMKC, I hope that you're starting to understand the broad safety network that we have around students and that we are committed to their success. So our last speaker for today is Colin Foster, and Colin's going to talk with us about interpersonal conflict.
Thanks, Tammy. Well, first things first, my name's Colin Foster. I am from Lubbock, Texas originally, so I'm a Texan, transplanted to Kansas City. I have worked with students on lots of different levels as an academic advisor, but now I work in the School of Medicine. We actually have an accelerated program at UMKC where students are able to get a bachelor's degree and an MD degree in 6 years. So there's it's a lot of coursework, a lot of pressure, a lot of stress. And sometimes that can result in more than just interpersonal conflict, but this is definitely something that I think if everything else in your life was going fine, but your relationship with a friend or a roommate is not going well, then everything else is tainted. It can really be a challenge for students. And so I actually introduced this topic last year originally because I just see it as so important for students. So I think one of the first things that you can kind of remind your students to do is ask them to assess their expectations. Are they realistic expectations for their roommate or for their friend, or are they unrealistic? It's pretty hard for a roommate to read your thoughts. And so if a student hasn't explicitly communicated that something is a problem or that something's upsetting, then how is that roommate supposed to know? So I think that can really impact, as far as those assumptions can be pretty big. And then for the first time for a lot of students, they're encountering people from different cultural and family backgrounds. And so it's one thing to experience somebody in a classroom that might be from a different background, but to actually live in the same space as somebody else, that's very different. And so I think there can be a learning curve, and trying to realize that those kinds of things can impact the way that a person interacts. Some people will, based upon the family background that they're from, will never confront you about something. They will never tell you that you're wrong or ask you to do something because that's not what they've been taught. And so if you aren't asking proactively, is this okay? Can I do this? And sometimes you have to ask many times. You're never going to get from them that actually they want you to do something different. Or there may be students from backgrounds who will push and push and push and push, and they're not conflict averse. They actually want conflict, and that's healthy for them. That's what they're used to. And so you get those two people in the same room, and you can see how hard that would be and how challenging that would be. And so I think sometimes those backgrounds and family situations can really impact that, and being able to offer that to your students that, well, it might be just that student's background is different than yours and they approach these situations differently. I think a lot of times students have a tendency to take things really, really personally. And let's take, for example, that a student is in one of Dr. Davis's history classes and they're not doing well at all. And, maybe they had something go wrong in their family at home, but their roommate doesn't know that. They don't know that they're failing a class, or they just failed a test, and they just erupt on their roommate. There might be hidden stressors that are really being touch points for that student that are really tough. And I think it's hard for students to detach themselves from some of those. Maybe they kind of get attacked by their roommate. It may not be that your student was at all the cause of that. They may just be the person that's getting unloaded on. That doesn't make it any easier for them in the moment, but I think it can help them to not just totally scrap the relationship down the road, to be able to separate and say, you know what, I'm going to assume the best, which that is a hard thing to do. In the best of times, it's hard. And in our COVID world, where so many things are minefields, it is really tough to assume that the person sitting across from you actually is a good person and has your best interests at heart. And I think if you can help your student to remember that that's the starting point where they should approach every relationship, it's going to make their life a little easier and a little better. Maybe not easier, but better. And so the next thing I have out here is setting some clear boundaries, which I know we're 7 weeks into the semester. And so the time for setting boundaries, it's not totally gone, but it might be harder at this point to instill some boundaries. But yeah, I think they have to be able to say, okay, what are the things that really matter to me? Like I really need to get sleep. I need to go to bed by 11:30 every night. And this is the thing that really, it's a hill that I'm going to die on. Or, my roommate keeps putting their coat on my bed. Is that a thing that I'm going to care a lot about? And so helping them choose their battles, and then having that conversation with their roommates about the things that really matter to them. And I think having those expectations communicated clearly up front, or even in the middle of the semester, sometimes you just gotta bite the bullet and have that conversation. And it can make a lot of other things better, because again, if your student isn't communicating with the roommate about things that are upsetting them, the roommate's not going to know. And those things can fester under the surface and really explode down the road. Now, I'm saying all this to you as if you haven't had any interpersonal conflict before, as if you haven't ever had roommates that were hard, as if you haven't ever, had a spouse or a partner that you had to merge your life with. But the reality is all of you in some ways probably experienced this before. And I don't know if you're experts on this, but you certainly have experience. And so I think apart from the resources that students have immediately at their disposal with the residence life staff, the residence life director, all that, and those are great resources that you should direct your students to primarily. You can use your own experience, and maybe this is a place where you've never talked to your student about struggles that you've had in relationships, but it might be a place for you to connect with your student and say, actually, it hasn't always been perfect with my spouse, or I had a roommate in college that was really tough too, and I didn't handle it perfectly, and this is the advice I would give you in this situation. Maybe you've already had those conversations, but I think it can be a good connecting point. And then the other two resources here are some that, I think are pretty straightforward, but academic advisors can be helpful, if for no other reason, to tell students that they're not crazy and that this stuff happens consistently. And then the counseling center, I think if a student is kind of is really struggling with some of the things that have been said, or just the situation, not feeling safe, I think the counseling center can really be a helpful place to resolve some of those things. So yeah, I can't see anybody, so I don't know how you're feeling. I don't know if this is hitting home, but hopefully this content has been helpful for you, and it's an honor to be able to impart some of these things that we've learned working with your students so closely.
So we've got a few minutes left. Do we have, I think I was able to address everything through the chat that had come up. Do we have any other questions that you want to bring forward? And I let Jeff know that I had not even considered the idea of students needing to have private spaces to make phone calls. So that certainly is something that I will take back for us to have a conversation about, to see if we can establish some private spaces where students can go to make phone calls and things like that. Kim, are you aware of any spaces that we might be able to advertise?
Yeah, that was a really good point too that I'm seeing, and I am going to follow up on the kind of student services side of things, the student affairs, with our interim deans of students, Todd Wells and Keisha Dees-Burnett, and check into that. I know for sure though, and Tammy, we've seen each other in the student union. The student union is a phenomenal space, and it's often very quiet. There's often some different study rooms. We could work with folks, potentially the mind-body connection is in the space. And so there definitely are some spaces here. Definitely talking to your RA to say, maybe I know that they're working with residential life and maybe making some updates on some of the community spaces. But really, if you're a residential student, talk to your RA. I'm going to say it 3 more times, talk to your RA. talk to your RA, to encourage your students to talk to their RA, because that resident advisor may have a really great kind of third space or something that they use to have some privacy. But I'll follow up on my end on that too, because I know that's come up with just even taking an online class and not wearing headphones and being able to, you know, again, a counseling session in non-COVID world, being in one-on-one in a counselor space it's hard to replicate that sometimes in the virtual space.
Yeah. So were there other questions that any of our parents wanted to bring forward that we might be able to address?
Feel free, if you want to take yourself off of mute, you can also you know, talk in the session or use the chat. We'll read some of that out. We'd love to help you with anything that brought you here today. That's why we're all here for you.
This is Brent, and it was very informational, so I appreciate it today. One of the things that Cheney had mentioned were like personality, you know, and profile testing, and to help you explore and discover, you know, maybe new ways for the students to go as they progress in their life. What is the resource for accessing those personality tests? And is that through a particular office or?
Well, yeah, it's Brent, it's through career counseling. If you go there, there's a log on for students. Okay. And once they kind of log into the system, all sorts of resources, suggestions are available to them. And so they work through some of the personality tests, you know, some of the standard old ones that have been around forever that kind of crack me up and things of that sort. But all of them are really good if you approach them in the right way. You know, I'm reminded we had access to a career counseling program that a student and I took together. I took it first, and it said I would have a rewarding career, find a great interest in designing health care facilities, which just cracked me up, because I can tell you categorically that's not something I want to do. But those are the kind of conversations, you know, that you kind of need to have with yourself. But some of the others were actually kind of breathtakingly on target. They said I would find a rewarding career in education, history, archaeology, or urban planning. That's like my list. That's my dream list, right? But these all are, you know, a lot of them are through the counseling center, the services for students. Others, you know, if they come to, I think any of us could probably like log on and find both the university systems for the students or help direct the students to something more detailed. These are available, and I would start with counseling services.
Okay. Thank you all very much for the information today. It was very helpful. So,
I'm putting a link to the PowerPoint in the chat. So if you'd like to have that, when all of the resources that are there, you can have those available.
That's great. Thank you.
And for folks who are watching this after and may not have access to chat, I will make sure in the Parent and Family Facebook group, as well as you can email families@umkc.edu, and I can help connect you to any of the resources we talked about today, as well as the document. Yep, because I am the gal that's generally checking the families email, and we're super responsive. Tammy knows this because I even just connected a family member to her yesterday, and we're always here to help you all in whatever way possible. I think that Tammy, I think put in the chat about culture of care, but I don't know if you want to kind of talk about that briefly and really what that means for the academic advising and the academic side of everything.
Sure. So our culture of care, you can see I've got it up on my board. I look at it all the time. Our culture of care really is just a commitment to students and to families that we treat your students like our families, and our chancellor has challenged us to always keep that mindset that if we treat our students like our families, we will never make a wrong decision for them. So this is about making sure that we listen to students, making sure that we respect all students, that we're not imparting our values and judgments on individual students, that we're seeing them as an individual with value, in themselves, in and of themselves, that everyone has a right to be respected and valued, that we have a right to have high expectations and to challenge students to step up. But our role is to help them learn to help themselves so that they can continue to make decisions as we move forward. So that's a little, just kind of a brief synopsis of our culture of care, but that's something that we have a high commitment to and something that we have regular conversations about on our campus.
Thank you for sharing that. I know in the student affairs and student services side of things too, the culture of care means creating those spaces and making sure our staff and our faculty and our student leaders, even just the peer-to-peer piece of, as we were talking about, the peer academic leaders and our resident advisors and some of the respective academic units have students who are really, really involved and invested. Our Student Government Association, really there's a lot of advocacy and a lot of touch points for your students to really live in that culture of care and be a part of that. They definitely can be really active in that or just feel very loved by our community in whatever way possible.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, Kim. I mentioned several times in the chat today about our UMKC Connect system. So that's how students are connected, how we kind of keep that safety net around your students. And we are currently having conversations about how we can expand the use of Connect so that we know students are talking to their resident assistants or to their peer academic leader or their SI leader. So how can we expand access to UMKC Connect so that as a student discloses something to another student leader, that we can also allow those leaders to have access to issue referrals to counseling or to financial aid or to additional services to support the student or back to the student's academic advisor. So your student's success is certainly something that we have a strong commitment to and are working to improve on every day.
I have a question to kind of direct to Colin, actually, and if there's a parent who has a question, then certainly I will shut up and allow them to ask. But I mean, Colin, your comments were about interpersonal conflict in terms of like roommates and things. Do you have suggestions on students who perhaps are at home, not necessarily in a dorm or an apartment with roommates, and actually the interpersonal conflict is like with family in terms of having that space? I mean, I've had students who have said to me, well, because I'm home doing online classes instead of like on campus, my family is saying, oh, well, you're home, so you can watch your younger siblings and help them with virtual learning without kind of recognizing that they need space for that. What recommendations do you have of interpersonal conflict where actually the conflict is coming like from family?
That's a doozy of a question there. I feel like you should probably answer it first, but you kind of already did. Honestly, I think it comes down to the student having to have that big boy or big girl conversation with mom and dad, and that's hard. And so I don't know. We're talking to mostly parents today, so I guess if you are doing that as a parent, maybe you need to have an explicit conversation with your student about, hey, I know you can't do this all the time. I don't want you to do it every day, all the time, but like, can you help on this day at this time? And not have this, I think having some clear, defined expectations about we need your help on this day, but the rest of the time we want to give you space to do what you need to do to be successful academically. I think it's the like unstated, we just assume that you're going to help because you're at home part that's so challenging for students. And so if it's a student, I would say you need to figure out what your boundaries are going to be, similar to what you do for a roommate, and say, I'm happy to help in these ways, or I really can't help right now because this is a really tough week or whatever. But it is having to have those conversations as an adult. And yes, they're still your parents. And yes, they might be paying for a lot of things, but they're also asking you to do something that's really challenging in going to school, where you're taking this step to go to school. Maybe you're paying for loans and things. And so you have to be able to dedicate time to be successful in that too. And yeah, I mean, what Tammy said, I think communication is really, really the key. It's tough. Those are hard conversations, but that's part of what we're asking students to do in this break toward independence is you're an adult now. And so you got to start having these conversations, even if it's with mom and dad. So
and I think that's important for students to realize that we can have a conversation and I can listen to you. That doesn't mean that I'm going to be able to accommodate your request fully, or maybe in some cases even at all, but at least I'm providing you an opportunity to tell me how you feel and what would be best for you so that I can at least consider that.
I think too, thinking about it from thinking about it from a student perspective, the more that you can share your calendar or just share things if you're comfortable, or maybe every Sunday you make a habit that you connect with XYZ family member and lay out what the structure of the week looks like. And for that family member, for that parent family member, you know, however you kind of hold your student accountable to doing that, because that doesn't necessarily need to be your responsibility. It's a shared space where you can hopefully, you know, talk about that, or empower your student to say, hey, can you put your calendar on the fridge so that we are making sure that you have the time and you have the space to be able to take care. And then asking them just kind of too what they need. Do they have headphones? Do they have a space, whether that's a desk, a kitchen table? Some of those basic things will then help them so that they're comfortable and feeling well moving into the class structure.
Yeah, I guess the other thing I could offer to a student is, not physically being there. You could potentially go to the library to do your study time and have set hours where you're actually not at home, and so they can't rely on you for those things. If it's an issue of where they're pushing boundaries that you aren't excited about, then actually not being there physically, it makes it pretty hard for them to expect you to do something if you're not there. And that's a different level. But I think sometimes it can actually help you have boundaries too, because this is my time to study. I'm going to go and study. And then when I'm home, I'm home. You know, and I think even as a professional, that's something that I try to do is once I open the door and I'm out of my office, okay, then kids, it's okay. Like, I'll welcome you in. But until that time, I need space. And so I think setting those boundaries can be helpful too. So.
Fantastic. I am going to spotlight myself. There we go. I'm going to wrap us up here. I am just so over the moon by how amazingly just helpful this conversation was, the amount of information shared, and just thank you to our panelists, to my dear friends and colleagues, folks that are here. You know, when I say, hey, we've got Family Week coming up and it's in a few short weeks and we have to figure it out remotely, can you help me? And everybody's like, yes, because we care so much about our parents, families, supporters. You all, we want you all to be knowledgeable resources so that we support you, and so you can support your students. And again, we want you to have a little, you don't have to have every single thing memorized from this conversation today, but hopefully maybe reflect on one takeaway or one person that you might contact if you ever have a question or an issue, or if anything, even just remember families@umkc.edu. If you're like, oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start because XYZ is happening, or I'm marinating on this after this meeting, and we will get you where you need. So again, Family Week is taking place all week. We have some more events today and throughout the weekends, and all of our panelists are just amazing, amazing people. So thank you for being here today. Anything more, Tammy, that you'd like me to say?
No, I think that's everything. Thank you again to the panelists for being here and being part of the presentation. I appreciate the partnership and your care for our students every day.
Awesome. I'm going to press stop record here.